Hello.
Hey,
Hello. I'm Belle. I use she, they pronouns.
My name is Xavier. I use they, them pronouns.
my name is Maeve. I use she, her pronouns.
My name is AJ. I use she, her pronouns, and we are VIP, very impactful people.
And today we're going to be discussing two films again, T-Men and Scarface. Um, we're going to be focusing on each film's oral and visual aesthetic accords with its respective genre, and also to explain how the aesthetics of each respective genre, which are noir and gangster, both connect with and differ from one another. Focusing on formal work on both elements of both films, as well as censorship in Hollywood, and discussing how these films portray the underbelly of post-World War II America.
Yeah. So the first film we watched was Scarface from 1932, directed by Howard Hawks. And quick synopsis is we have the, what is that word? Is that lieutenant?
Yes.
What does that say?
The lieutenant.
Lieutenant, yeah.
All right. I don't think I haven't seen that word written in a while. Sorry. So the lieutenant of the South Side of Chicago crime boss, Tony Camonte, he ignores the new superior, his superior's wish to not attack the Irish mob, and he goes out there and he's a member of the Italian mob, and he starts messing things up, and he eventually gains a lot of power and notoriety. And his newfound power puts many targets on his back, including the police and his former boss. So the characters we have are Tony, played by Paul Mooney. We have his sister Jessica, played by Anne Dovrick. We have Johnny Lovo, who's the new crime boss guy, played by Osgood Perkins. We have Poppy, who is Johnny's girlfriend and also the woman that Tony's after. And then we have Guino Rinaldo, played by George Raft, and Rinaldo is Jessica's husband at the end of the film.
And then our second film for this week was T-Men, which was made in 1947, directed by Anthony Mann. And it's a semi-documentary style film noir, which is very revolutionary at the time, about two U.S. Treasury agents who go undercover in attempt to break up an illegal counterfeiting ring. And they pose as counterfeiters from out of town. And they do eventually join the gang, but things get really messy along the way. And we have some characters. So we have Dennis O'Brien, who goes undercover as Vanny Harrigan, and he's played by Dennis O'Keefe. We have Tony Gennaro, who goes undercover as Tony Galvani, and he's played by Alfred Ryder. We have the schemer, played by Wallace Ford, and Mary Gennaro, who is Tony's wife, played by June Lockhart.
So something that is very prevalent with both of these films, especially with Scarface, is the censorship that occurred while they were being made and when they were trying to be released. So it started with the Breen Code, which was adopted in 1934, 2 years after Scarface was released. It was kind of because it was sort of a Temple of Doom caused the PG-13 deal, where films like Scarface and Scarface itself really did cause the creation of this. It was a very Catholic-centered code, which was called by Thomas Doherty, no mere list of thou shalt nots, but a homily that sought to yoke Catholic doctrine to Hollywood formula. The guilty are punished, the virtuous rewarded, the authority of church and state is legitimate, and the bonds of matrimony are sacred. So in layman's terms, Catholicism controlled Hollywood. And if your movie did not go by the standards of Catholicism, you were not going to get released. And it was a very, very strict code. It also got very political. Like influenced Casablanca. They even prevented anti-Nazi films from being made, which is extremely strict. Seems like anyone would agree at that time. Until the FBI found out that there were secret Nazis in the ring, so then they got released. And then that led to the Hays Code, which actually kept a lot of films out of theaters, which for Scarface in particular, it was prevented for over a year because of all the violent imagery, and they actually were forced to delete a ton of the scenes with violence in it. They were forced to add the opening monologue that and the closing monologue, which I thought felt a little out of place, and now I know why, of saying, well, all of these actions are condemned. Don't commit crime, kids. And he was fighting for a long time to have this in theaters, and they just kept it out for so long. So
Yeah.
it's,
I think there's also even an alternate ending that they
yes.
had to change because they were like, Tony can't get away with it in the end, man. He's got to be
No.
punished.
Yeah, and they have to. There have been reports. I was not able to find a legitimate source for this, but there were reports that in the original script, the actual they had politicians partying with the gangsters. So obviously that they knew, well, we're not ever going to get past that, so why waste money filming it? That is based on Wikipedia, but still they still had to cut a ton of stuff out, which is why you don't see a ton of stuff.
Speaking of news sources like Wikipedia, here's a smooth transition into some differences between the two films that we've noticed. So these are kind of general to set the stage, but in film noir, we have kind of news media works kind of hand in hand with film noir, whereas in gangster films like Scarface, it's more of an exploitation of the media. The gangsters are committing these crimes to be seen by the public and to be eventually reported on, like in the papers, to gain notoriety. The violence in gangster films is very public, meant to be seen, whereas like the noir crimes are kind of sort of unseen, make it appear like it was an accident. And the story that does appear in the newspaper is never the one that like actually happened. That's just what they thought happened, which you could never know unless you were inside the crime, which the viewer is.
And I feel like they like also tend to like, I don't know, use in noir, they tend to use like newspaper as like a reference point a lot more. Like O'Brien and Gennaro like literally did all of their research by going through newspapers and like talking about it like as if those are facts, when that is like definitely not how the news is portrayed in gangster films.
Yeah, definitely. It's because it's for the gangsters, it's about getting their name out there, and how I think it's such an interesting contrast of, in noir, you really don't, if the truth was in the newspaper, it would be over, like movie over, you're in jail, like you don't get away with it. There's no story there. But the fact that like the noir criminal is sort of getting away with it to an extent where like the story that is published is wrong, versus in gangster films, how it's like almost the complete opposite. It's exactly probably what happened because like 50 people saw it because they do it in broad daylight for the like maximum visibility. I think that's just such a cool parallel between these, like opposite between these two genres. And there are also some similarities that we found between these two films. Just a small little fact that I noticed, at least, is that there was kind of a weird coin flipping thing going on in both films. So we had Guino Ronaldo and Scarface flipping a coin, and there was some other guy that I can't remember exactly who it was in T-Man that was also flipping a coin, which was I thought that was weird that came up in both films.
I
Um,
I see that as almost like a connection to fate, pretty much. I mean,
mm,
Tony is in Scarface going way too far. Like he's really pushing it, and his fate is pretty much sealed from the second that he messes with the Irish mob.
mhm,
Whereas in T-Men, the implication is the government is so meticulous and crafty that they will win. So if they are after you, your fate is over. So the coin flip to me kind of says like, oh, it's kind of up in the air for them, but for us, it's really not.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
set in stone already.
No.
It's
Mhm.
kind of like the beginning of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, where they're like, well, we're flip a coin, it always lands on heads. Well, we're gonna die.
Right.
Which
Yeah. I think one thing that both noir and gangster films do is they kind of both bring you inside the crime, but to a certain extent. I don't think it's the same extent, kind of how I think like, the coin flipping sort of has like functions slightly differently in these two films. Um, like in noir crimes, we are like the viewer is made into an accomplice of the crime because it's just like us and like the one or two people that committed the crime that know what actually happened. Whereas the gangster crimes, it's like the guy that is like planning the crime, maybe it's a mob boss, and then you've got like 20 other guys who are going to help do it, and then you, the viewer, are also in on it. So the stakes don't feel as high, like in a gangster movie, as like the viewer as it is with the noir crime, because there's like so few people that know about it. If like in Scarface, if Tony had gone and just like not told anyone what he was going to do and just gone to like cause trouble against the Irish mob, that would have been a completely different story than, what he actually did, which he went out with a bunch of guys and, they roughed the place up. And I,
I feel like it's just really interesting that they show you the behind the scenes of the crime, but in such different ways. Like, oh man, what was I gonna say? Oh no. Okay, so yeah, like the protagonist in film noir might not even know what's going on, and you do. But also in film noir, they're like often striving to like complete the most secretive, most perfect crime, where it's just the complete opposite in gangster films because it's the most obvious, but sometimes sort of mundane crime. Like it's the kind of thing that they are doing every week. Like it's not
yeah,
like preparing for months for like this huge thing that you're keeping secret from everyone in the world. It's like sharing with your family this like thing that you do all the time.
yeah. It's like, hey, I'm going out to like pick up some dinner. Do you guys want anything? Do you want to come? Like, we do this every week.
Yeah.
It's not a big, like, crime is not a big deal in gangster films because like it's something that is consistently happening and like expected to happen. Whereas noir, there's more of a sense of like a fall from grace or like a further fall from the gutter into like knee deep in the shit.
And I think that totally goes back to the codes because like gangster films at the end of the day do not always condemn those actions. Like you don't see you don't have all of the same subtle but not subtle brainwashing about America that's like also undermined by the structure of noir, but it's like still enforced that it needs to be present in some way. Like you just don't have that in the same capacity in gangster films because it hasn't been established yet.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like the gangster films also like film noir makes crime seem insanely difficult. Like you said, it's meticulous planning where the gangster crimes are just kind of like they shoot someone and then the guy just walks away. It's meant to almost look like stupidly easy. Like because that's their whole thing. Like I could get away with whatever I want. Where
Yeah.
film noir is I'm gonna get away with this, but I need to put like every single ounce of me into it to get there.
It's like a different form of like testing the limits in each, I think.
Mhm.
Like they're obviously both like pushing against this boundary of the law, but I think it's like, in like the most subtle way to see how much you could get away with, or in the most obvious way to see how much you could get away with.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. It's like in gangster films, the cops and the whole public know who's behind the crime. That's the point. They know that it's like this gang or that gang, but they can't pin them with like specific information. Whereas in noir, they don't necessarily know who's doing it. It could be anybody. It could be you. It could be me. Um, and that's what I think also creates some of the suspense of like, as the viewer, you know who it is, and you don't know how it's going to pan out, but it's never good.
Yeah.
It's like, who's the spotlight on, and who's gonna, in noir, the the light is not on them, they're in the shadows. But in gangster films, I'm in the spotlight, I'm just completely out in the open, but you
Yeah.
can't touch me.
That does bring us right to lighting, doesn't it?
It does.
Mm.
Which is interesting because both use lighting in like a very interesting manner, and complex. Where in T-Men, the cinematography uses high contrast and sparse lighting to accent like the dangers of pretty mundane like urban environments, like alleyways and just like really dark corners. And on top of that, uses really simple lighting, like light bulbs and literally just overhead lights instead of massive film studio lights to make it feel real and authentic. Because I mean, most both in gangster and film noir, the purpose of the films is to make it kind of feel real and grounded in some regard. Like you're supposed to believe the crime, minus like obviously there's the oblivious bystanders and whatnot, but you are supposed to be like this world is somewhat built in reality, so they're using that lighting to get there. Where instead Scarface is still using it to kind of like make the urban landscape seem a bit scary, but it's a lot more consistent. There's more like in direct view of the audience and less
Yeah.
in the shadows, where T-Men is kind of like hiding some things on purpose to give this really ominous, dark environment, which the director of photography did the same thing in The Big Combo. It's this very stylistic in film noir to use that dramatic lighting and low angle shots as well in T-Men to kind of go with the documentary style narration in there, which to me, like both of those formal elements of the lighting and the camera movements kind of go to show like that this sense of reality that is being built through the narration and the knowledge there is a complete facade. And
Mhm.
like the the agents eventually get like engulfed in their fraudulent identities, which to me, I mean, is again mimicking the post-war feelings of America, where it's just like,
Yeah.
what is real anymore? Like
And
Mm.
I feel
everything's
like
changed.
it like does that classic noir thing where it like absolutely undermines that like patriotic message that it's like assigned.
Right.
Because like, yeah, like if you're watching this film, you're not going to believe a single word that anyone is saying about how great the government is. Like, you're just not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like a lot of that has to do with like how these formal elements tie into like the authenticity of what is being said, I feel like. um and
Mm.
yeah, and I feel like the mood needs to be set in noir. You need to be like totally immersed in this like feeling of like suspecting everyone in the world because anything could be happening at any time, whereas like gangster films just really like rely on what you can see and hear, like really blatantly a little bit more. Like the fights that are like out in the open and like all of the loud jarring sounds, like I feel like you're afraid because it's shocking you and because you can see it all happening. But with noir, you really need to like really rely on like a lot more subtlety,
Right.
because you need to make that the audience feel that way without showing any blood, without showing any fights, without having any loud gunfire.
Yeah, it needs to like create it through like more of an ominous tone, which
Mhm.
which again like goes into just the themes of both genres, where the noir is obscured. It's deep in the shadows. No one knows what's going on.
Yeah.
So we can't even see some of the people in the film. It's just silhouettes.
Yeah, honestly, like usually you could only see like their back or their face or like their hat or their face, or like you can't ever see a full person in a lot of the scenes in that film, I feel like.
Mm.
Like I was
I
like, is
think
my brightness all the way up? When I was rewatching.
I think one thing that was kind of, it felt funny to me in Scarface, at the very end, when like, you know, Tony is in his fortified apartment but doesn't do a good job using the fortifications, to be honest. And like the police come, they bring these giant floodlights, and they literally have like 10 like bunch of lights just like straight at his apartment. And then he tries to, you know, escape at the end, and he like literally walks out into this like wall of light. And like it kind of feels like, in a sense, maybe like that sort of that justice that, you know, the censorship kind of required, where it's like he's been committing these crimes in broad daylight, and now he's getting like murdered in like artificial light, but still just right out there in the open with a ton of people watching. It's kind of like
Literally
he
in
has
the
become the
spotlight.
victim of his crimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like another thing that, going back to noir and like all of the obscurity, like the mise en scène in T-Men involves a lot of like layered shots, and as we said, like low angles, like really complex camera work. So like a lot of shots that are like, there's one where a character is walking up the stairs this way, the camera is like from below, and the character walks up, and then up the stairs like take a turn. But you're seeing all of this from like the floor level. And so you're just like seeing this person like ascend, but you're only seeing like the feet. Anyway, it's like crazy stuff. Like views into other rooms from like a room where the action is happening, but like behind them, you can see a room of like 50 people just going about their business while they're having this crazy conversation.
It's a very like hiding in plain sight and
Yeah. And
sort
like
of looking from the outside in, because with gangster film, like gangster, like we said earlier in the news, even though we know everything, we're still kind of on the outside because we don't really know specifically that what the guy did. You just know, oh, he wronged him, and obviously this guy shot him.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's why like we talked about in class, that's why The Sopranos was so popular. It gave you such a deep insight into the thoughts of these people, and
into a
also,
family.
yeah, and that's what Scarface did. It gave you an insight into this guy who just wanted to go kill a bunch of Irish.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Yeah. And then like, oh, anyway. Yeah, just also there were just a lot of shots through like windows and stuff in T-Men. And like there was this one time at Triano's house when the door opens and you're like 2 rooms away and you see it happening. And it's just like creating a lot of depth, I feel like, in the noir, and like levels to the setting.
I like the POV shot before POV shots.
Yeah.
Like I know we watched that pretty awful attempt at a POV film a couple of weeks ago, but this did it more right, because it's also very documentary style, because in documentaries a lot of the times they can't get too close to the action or they'll get hurt. So watching it a little bit back, even though you're farther away, it kind of makes you feel more into the action, because you get that.
Because you can also see the whole scope of what the character would see.
Yeah.
And
it is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I feel like in both films there was they both did a good job at kind of like quite literally within like the shot creating like a visual marker of like the X marks the spot. Like we had that in T-Men. There was a shot, guy standing like down below, and then the camera, there's just like giant like wooden panels like this. And then in Scarface, at the end of the film, when Tony goes to his sister's apartment to ultimately murder her husband, which she doesn't know that at the time. Husband opens the door. There's an X on the door, which is presumably just like, you know, the number of the room, the apartment. And then he gets killed on the spot. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, no, literally.
It's really weird just looking into everything and the different insights we get into these people's lives. Sometimes to a detriment. Like I found with T-Men, I really liked it, but whenever that narrator guy showed up, I just got completely taken out of everything because I felt like I was watching a PSA.
Yeah,
like
AJ and I were talking about what, I don't know, I just feel like that to me was like a little too on the nose documentary style voiceover.
Yeah.
It's like it's obviously purposeful, but it just was so annoying to me. Like honestly, I just was infuriated.
When I just thought, why are they saying this, was right after Gennaro died. And you know, okay, he died because he sort of gave himself away to get that piece of paper so that the case could continue. And it's really obvious what just happened. You don't need to explain, but then the voiceover says, for this scrap of paper, Agent Garano had sacrificed his life, but O'Brien had to carry on alone. This right, and it's very obvious and unnecessary. And then they show a shot of the contact picking up the claim check. And then the narration comes in again. He left the claim check where his contact man, Lindsay, would pick it up. And you didn't need that. I know that technically the screenwriting rule is put in the voiceover when you don't need it and don't put it in when you do. But I think this is the line of, you really didn't need it.
And it's his tone of voice too. It's it's really like he's telling you something you don't know, the way that an informational like training video talks to you.
It's a PSA.
It's painful. Yeah.
And I feel like so much of it could have been like easily have been dialogue. They like almost went out of their way to like take away dialogue to give this guy something to say. Like at one point he goes, they met on Belle Isle to quiz each other for the most important examination of their lives. They had to know all of the answers. Failure to do so would mean a bad grade later on in the shape of a bullet or an ice pick, which is just like the most ridiculous thing to say. And also it could have been said in less words as like one line of dialogue. Oh man, if we don't know this stuff, we're really gonna get an ice pick to the head or whatever. Like it could have
also
been.
Why wasn't it a voiceover? And because it could have just been the main character narrating. Why was it narration from an unknown god?
Yeah.
And not voiceover from the main character like every single other noir.
That also, yeah, that threw me.
I feel like the narrator in T-Men, it's like almost occasionally hard-boiled dialogue, but like not quite. It's only hard-boiled in the sense that like it's kind of out of pocket, like you weren't expecting that, and you're like, why is this guy like speaking right now? Like for this scrap of paper, like no, I wasn't. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, but I also feel like it is a little more formal than like a lot of hard-boiled dialogue. And like it's like if you were a film noir person trying to sound like a documentary person.
Yeah, it's like medium boiled.
Yeah, soft boiled.
Not soft boiled, because like this is soft boiled dialogue.
Yes.
What we're doing.
Yeah.
It's a very weird sound to hear, just in the middle of, like, right after someone died. Oh, it's heartbreaking. And as you can see, he just died. That's what happened. I know that.
Yeah.
It's just a weird sound.
Yeah. It's very
Um,
matter of fact.
Yeah.
Very kind of intense, but in the wrong way.
Yeah, Captain Obvious in like the worst way.
Yeah.
Like a news reporter talking about the events.
I
Yeah.
guess that really is like what it is. And I guess if we're feeling that way, they kind of accomplish their goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
luckily the
it
other
just
stuff.
annoyed me, and I wish it wasn't there.
I mean, the other stuff was really good. Like all the other in T-Men, there was a bit more violence, and
Mhm.
and in Scarface, even though they had to take it out, that shootout scene had, like, I noticed in a lot of old movies that didn't have the technology, the sound design doesn't really sound great, but in that one, the shootout scene was really good sound and very loud and very jarring, but in a good way.
Yeah, and I feel like where film noir relies on like a lot of mood stuff and on the voiceover, like gangster films really rely on like a lot of the shocking sounds and everything.
Yeah, I think especially coming right off the tail of, you know, like silent films where, you know, you go in and you see this film and you kind of, you know, you see Charlie Chaplin and you just kind of like laugh along while you're reading the title cards and stuff. And then you just come into this a few years later. Like I think purely they were just like plainly like massively excited to have like access to being able to like use sound in films, and they thought, I think we need to just do this in the most obnoxious way possible.
Quite
And people liked
loud
it.
and proud.
Yeah.
Loud and proud and just completely out there. And the message,
Super. Yeah.
even though the message at the end is kind of not fitting, which makes sense. It was tacked on. It's a tacked on ending of, hey, look at all this cool crime stuff. Don't do that though.
Yeah.
Crime doesn't pay.
Yeah. And
They should
knowing is
have
half
had
the battle.
they should have had the narrator from T-Men come on for Scarface, and he should have said that at the end.
Yeah.
By the way, crime doesn't pay. Don't try this at home.
But in
Final
the end,
impact.
yeah, it was a final impact on everyone, and it was,
Yeah.
they were both pretty impactful on everything in terms of the codes and in terms of getting the violence out there, and very impactful across the board.
Yeah, doing the good work of getting the violence out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also
A good tarmac of violence.
Good tarmac.
A good smock, you know. Smock
well, they
sized
got
tarmac.
they got the blood all over their smocks when they were invisible blood, because blood doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody bleeds.
left a bad mouthfeel in the government's mouth.
Bad mouthfeel.
Oh, very bad mouthfeel. So bad that they were like, actually,
Yeah.
I should take that out of the mouth.
actually, no.
I'm gonna put that back.
Yeah.
That's what the narrator.
You got to put that in the trash right away.
The narrator had a bad mouthfeel the whole time.
Oh yeah, every time.
His voice, maybe.
It didn't. Yeah.
Terrible. Just awful. But like they have had impact on film, it also had an impact on us. And we hope that we've had an impact on you, because like we said, we are very impactful people. So we hope that throughout your lives, we continue to impact.
Yeah.
And we hope that we will continue to impact next week.
Yeah. Throughout all of the films.
Throughout all the films and throughout all of time. Across the tarmac of life.
That's the stuff right there. The tarmac of life.
Have an
Goodbye.
impactful week.
See you next week.